The 2020 NBA draft was the most unique draft in NBA history, one, given the fact that it wasn't in person, literally all of the players were drafted in their homes. The draft happened in the middle of November, unlike when it's normally done in June because of the pandemic, putting the season on hold and restarting it again over the summer in the bubble. And for the players, this was a unique circumstance in that they didn't have a summer league. The draft combine was very limited in terms of their level of activity. Scouting and meeting with various teams, a lot of it had to be done virtually. And of course, the draft prospects who were playing in the NCAA did not have their March Madness tournament to highlight and showcase their skills to NBA scouts on a national scale. Thus, it made the 2020 draft tricky for teams to truly assess talent, determine who would be the best fit for their team, and it also just wasn't ideal for the players' perspective in terms of their overall development being thrown into a league literally less than 1 month after being drafted and playing their first regular season games, without a summer league, a shortened training camp, shortened preseason, all of it. And because of that, it's why, fast forward to today, over 2 years later, you see most teams got their picks horribly wrong. Well, in today's video, we're going to be redrafting the class of 2020 and see where teams might have selected a little differently. If you're new to the channel and you enjoy the content, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell to help the channel grow as we near 4 months since starting the channel, and in return I'll be providing more NBA content like this all season long. Now, this video is a continuation of the redraft series from the last 10 drafts. You can find the other redrafts on the channel playlist, but for 2020, as I mentioned, very unique circumstances. But the challenging thing about doing a redraft this early is that the players we're going to be going through are still so young, some of them still only 21 years old, not even close to hitting their primes yet. So there is obviously a lot of room to grow as players as they get older, build their game with time and experience. Like, I'm sure in a redraft of the 2011 class, if you did that 2 years later, we would not have thought anything like guys like Kawhi Leonard and Jimmy Butler in selecting them as top 5 picks in that draft, because they really didn't start proving much in the NBA by their 3rd season. So bearing all of that in mind, we're going to start with the number 1 pick, which the Minnesota Timberwolves used to draft Anthony Edwards, which Ant-Man has been great, super talented, so quick, so athletic, plays with a ton of energy, can shoot it from outside, but also operate downhill and getting to the basket. Since his rookie season, he's improved his overall defense, his passing has also gotten better, he's also been more efficient, as that was the biggest knock on him in his rookie year. A clear star player in the making, a franchise player that you can build around, and because of that, I'm actually not making any changes here and having the Wolves still take Edwards number 1 overall. As of right now, he's the best player from this draft class in my opinion, and with the highest ceiling. Again, obviously things can change depending on how other players break out, but I think the Wolves made the right choice here with the number 1 pick. With the number 2 pick, this is where the Golden State Warriors selected James Wiseman, a move that I'm sure they really regret now in hindsight, and all indications are pointing to the fact that Wiseman is a bust. Injuries haven't helped when it comes to Wiseman's development. He had to miss the entire season last year in their title run. In his rookie year, he was okay, like put up decent numbers on 11.5 points per game, nearly 6 rebounds, but wasn't very efficient, missed a lot of time still, and after Wiseman did come back from this injury, he was so bad that the Warriors sent him down to the G League, and even in the G League, he wasn't that great. Certainly not what you would expect from a number 2 overall pick. You can't blame the Warriors too much though, because Wiseman wasn't expected to go in the top 3. The Warriors obviously could have taken LaMelo Ball, but given they already had a full backcourt and the fact that they really needed a center to help build for the future, taking the number 1 recruit out of high school in Wiseman was too tempting to pass up with the 2nd pick. But given they already traded him, they would, no question, have taken another player in this redraft. We're not going to have them take LaMelo Ball, though. We're actually going to have them take Tyrese Halliburton instead. Now, you can question whether that would have made sense for the Warriors, given they already had Curry and Jordan Poole. Halliburton, another ball-dominant guard who likes to get up and down the court, get to the basket, shoot it from outside at a high clip. There are a lot of similarities in their game. The main difference for Tyrese, though, is that he is an insanely good passer, something that he has continued to develop over time. A solid defender on the perimeter as well, can get you 20 points per game. Honestly, there is a legit case for why Halliburton could even go number 1 in a redraft with the way that he's been progressing and his ceiling and potential being so high. So fit aside, I'm sure they would have figured out a way to make it work on the Warriors, or they just trade him to get much more value than they did in moving on from Wiseman. With the 3rd pick, this is where the Charlotte Hornets selected LaMelo Ball, who right out of the gate looked like the best player from the draft, putting up insane numbers, impeccable court vision, high-level score. Even though he got injured for a good portion of his rookie season, he still ended up winning Rookie of the Year. LaMelo was selected as an All-Star in his 2nd season as a replacement to an injured All-Star, and while LaMelo is still a very young and talented player, he hasn't been as efficient this season, isn't shooting the 3-ball particularly well, and I know it's the Hornets and they have no idea how to build around players, but his game hasn't really translated as much to winning, and the numbers he's putting up are great: 23 points, 6 rebounds, 8 assists. it's not as impressive when it's on a bad team that has won all but 16 games this season. All that being said though, I'm still having the Hornets take LaMelo here with the 3rd pick, as he's the best player available here at that selection. With the 4th pick, this is where the Chicago Bulls selected Patrick Williams, and as a Bulls fan, this was a surprise pick, as most mock drafts didn't even have Patrick going in the top 10, and while I still think this pick was a bit of a reach, not a bit, it was a big reach, I do still have high hopes for Patrick Williams. I'm not giving out hope on him just yet, although my patience is slowly starting to fade, as we haven't seen as much progress you would like to see for a player in his 3rd year. As such, instead of the Bulls taking Pat here, I'm going to have them select Tyrese Maxey out of Kentucky instead. Maxey, who actually fell all the way to 21 in the draft to the Philadelphia 76ers, has been a big-time success story for that team after the fallout with Ben Simmons and not panning out as a player that they thought that he could be. Maxey went from being somewhat of an afterthought in the draft as maybe a guy who could be a solid role player to a legit 3rd or 2nd option on a contending team. Made this massive leap in a sophomore season, going from 8 points per game to 17.5 to now averaging near 20 a game. Can shoot from outside, is aggressive in getting to the basket, can play the 1 or 2. Given the Bulls and their struggles right now, having a young up-and-coming guy like Maxey would have been a great fit for the team before they committed all this money to Lonzo Ball, who can't stay on the court. With the 5th pick, this is where the Cavs selected Isaac Okoro, which seemed like a good pick at the time. Cavs needed wings, they needed defenders, they were rebuilding, but yeah, not the right pick when you're rebuilding and looking to bring a potential franchise cornerstone with the top 5 pick. So instead of Okoro here, the Cavs are going to take Desmond Bane, who ended up becoming the last pick in the 1st round, taken 30th overall by the Celtics before moving him a few days later to the Grizzlies in a trade. And Desmond Bane has been this sneakily good player from this draft, if that's even a word. Wasn't high on most draft boards because he was a 4-year college player, had an okay season in his rookie year, but then broke out in his 2nd year and has been a big reason for the Grizzlies' success. I mean, people always talk about Ja being the reason the Grizzlies went from an NBA afterthought to a contender, which is true. He's a superstar and best player on that team, but they wouldn't even be close to what they are without Bane, who has been an incredible outside shooter for them, shooting over 43% on 7 attempts per game. That's one of the top 3-point shooters in the league, currently 3rd in the entire NBA. But not only that, and although the fit might not be the best for the Cavs now after trading for Donovan Mitchell, it would have been a great pickup at that time in their rebuild, and they could have traded him after the fact if needed. With the 6th pick, this is where the Atlanta Hawks selected Onyeka Okongwu, who has been decent. He struggled with some injuries for the better part of his career, but so far in his 3rd season has looked solid as a backup center behind Capella, and started when Capella has been out. Good footwork in the paint, decent rim protector. His rebounding has gotten better since entering the league, but even despite the improvements, he probably shouldn't have gone this high in the draft. So instead, I'm having the Hawks take Devin Vassell here. Now, who knows if Vassell would blossom into the player we're seeing now if he wasn't getting player development under exposure under a coach like Greg Popovich and playing on a team that is in a full rebuild. But he's a super talented player, in my view, a lot of upside potential with its versatile scoring ability. He's really started to perfect that outside shot, shooting over 40% from 3 on 7 attempts per game. Would love to see him up his defense a bit more to be a formidable two-way player in the NBA, but that will come with time. With the 7th pick, this is where the Detroit Pistons selected Killian Hayes. There were some mock drafts who had Hayes going top 5, which is crazy, especially when you see Hayes hasn't really panned out to be the player Pistons fans thought he was going to become. It's still early, he's only 21, but a very inefficient scorer, a huge negative on offense for the Pistons, a decent defender, but not good enough on defense to make up for his net negative on offense. As such, instead of taking Killian Hayes, the Pistons are going to select Saddiq Bey. I actually really like Bey's game, and although he hasn't stood out as much as some of his draft counterparts, I see more potential coming from him with a higher ceiling than guys like Desmond Bane and Devin Vassell. It's just a matter of whether he'll actually reach that potential. Bey ended up going 19th overall to the Nets and was actually then traded to the Pistons. More recently, moved in that 4-team trade to the Hawks. Good wing player, solid outside shooter, very strong and physical player. Need to see that defense improve, but 23 years old, having not entered his prime yet, I see him continuing to get better over time. And it's funny having him be selected by the Pistons here over Hayes, because the Pistons ended up getting rid of him via a trade, but they didn't want him as he didn't fit their overall build on the roster. So maybe not the best fit here, but still the best player available that they could move in a trade like they did. With the 8th pick, this is where the New York Knicks selected Obi Toppin. Wasn't a bad idea, not saying Toppin has been terrible, but they got a little too excited by the guy who was blowing away college teams with his freak athleticism and ability to score as a 4-year college player. But you also had to know who you're drafting him to as a coach of the Knicks. And speaking as a Bulls fan who watched Tom Thibodeau for many seasons, he's not going to play you unless you're giving maximum effort on defense, which we all know Toppin is not a good defender. And to be honest, hasn't been that great on offense either since entering the league. Probably not the best situation for him, as he's really not been given enough playing time to truly develop. He's about 25 years old, so I have a hard time seeing Obi Toppin suddenly becoming this breakout star, unlike a lot of other guys in this class who are still 21 years old. So instead, the Knicks are going to take someone they already got later in the draft anyway via a trade, and that's Immanuel Quickley. Quickley has his flaws, don't get me wrong, but I think most will agree he's a better pick than Toppin. Good scorer. Problem is that he's a little streaky. He's not the most consistent, especially shooting it from outside. Isn't that great on defense, but he hustles on that end of the floor, which we all know Tibbs likes. I don't think he's ever going to be a star in the league, but a top 10 pick in a pretty underwhelming draft class is a good spot for Quickley. At number 9, this is where the Washington Wizards selected Deni Avdija. I actually do like Avdija. I don't think the Luka comparisons were ever fair just because he played overseas and was a decent playmaker, but that aside, he has upside potential as he enters his prime with his ability to shoot from deep as well as playing solid defense. Really the biggest challenge for Avdija is being a more consistent shooter, as well as if he's going to be able to develop and get enough run when the Wizards have Kyle Kuzma, who I imagine they likely will be extending. But despite that, I'm not having Avdija go top 10 here in a redraft. Instead, I like the Wizards picking up Cole Anthony here. Cole Anthony was actually taken 15th overall by the Magic, another player who has struggled a bit with his overall consistency, was a starter on the Magic but is now coming off the bench. His overall production has dipped a bit. He's very athletic, very quick, plays with a lot of energy, just not the most efficient scorer. But when looking at the rest of the draft and seeing who's still on the board, yeah, he's the best player available here and would be a nice fit on Washington to complement their backcourt. And then finally, at number 10, this is where the Phoenix Suns selected Jalen Smith 10th overall. This one is unfortunate for the Suns because this was the season where they had that breakout year, going from being a lottery team in the bubble to the NBA Finals the following season. And they could have selected guys like Tyrese Halliburton, Tyrese Maxey to add even more firepower to that roster, but Jalen Smith turned out to be a bit of a dud for them. Now, that said, since getting traded to the Pacers, he has improved, and sometimes that's all the player needs, being put into a situation that allows for them to develop more on a rebuilding team. But regardless, the Suns aren't taking Smith here. Instead, I know I'm going to get some hate for this, but I'm going to have them select Patrick Williams. I'll admit, some of this is the biased Bulls fan in me, but at the same time, when you look at the rest of this draft class, while also considering the needs for the Suns at that time, Patrick Williams would actually be a good fit, being that solid defender in the front court, a player that could develop and give them some additional scoring, help space the floor, as Patrick is actually one of the better three-point shooters in this class. Not on that high of volume, but he shoots it at over 40% on over 3 attempts per game. And again, I have to say it, I still believe in Patrick. I still think he has a lot of potential, just hasn't hit that ceiling yet. So I think selecting him here at number 10 for the Suns makes sense. So there you have it, redrafting the top 10 picks in the 2020 draft. Let me know where you would have drafted differently. Check out all of my past redrafts as well. Be sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.